All right. Most found footage fans have seen SAVAGELAND. I mean, it's one of those things that it's unavoidable. It's, for free on YouTube. It's on every streaming platform, and it's kind of legendary. It leaves its mark. And I haven't always been the biggest fan, which puts me in a massive minority. Everybody loves this movie. This is like universally loved, and I did not enjoy it both times I watched it. And I knew I was missing something. I knew it was me, and I couldn't put my finger on what it was. So for this found footage broadcast, I went and got some help. The ultimate movie archivist and complete genius, Chris Vander Kaay, who has made an incredible movie, has a couple of movies coming out. He wrote a ton of books. We'll get more into his qualifications in a minute. But right now, strap yourselves in, because this is going to be a conversation that goes in directions I never saw coming. And if you stick around to the end, I promise a full slideshow of all of the photographs from the movie. So all that coming up and more. I am CJ Booker. I am trying to do 52 found footage movie reviews this year right here on YouTube, going in depth and giving you a sense of should you watch it. So if you haven't seen SAVAGELAND, you're in for a treat here. Don't worry, we flag spoilers well beforehand. Get comfortable, grab some popcorn, roll the intro, here we go.
Oh my god. Oh my god. This is gonna be a good day.
So this is my wife's computer. This camera is smoothing out my wrinkles incredibly well. Oh my God, look at how cherub-like I look in this camera. I do not look like this. This is not, I don't. Hey, Chris, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, we'll throw this back into the beginning. Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. Yeah, my name is Chris Vander Kaay. I am a filmmaker and author. I have made, as of the speaking of this time, one film has been released, but I've got two other found footage films that are on their way, hopefully sometime this year, 2026. I've written about 4 films about the history and philosophy of genre film, and I work in the arena of marketing, teaching people to market their companies better. But I have a deep love of curating, categorizing, and sharing information about found footage, film in particular, but very focused in found footage in a lot of it. So.
Yeah, and you had that fantastic series that can be watched on foundtv.com. What was it called?
Right. Yeah, Found Footage Finds. Thank you for mentioning that, because it's a project that was very germane to the conversation, and I completely forgot about it. But yeah, actually, I feature, and one of the episodes we talk about SAVAGELAND. And yeah, it's 5 episodes. It's a 5-episode series. Each episode focused on a different sort of subcategory of found footage. So an episode about Bigfoot, an episode about screen life movies, and things like that. And the goal basically being discussing it from what I consider to be a positive and somewhat scholarly, although still approachable fashion, and also just recommend a ton of movies in that arena. So it's for newbies who are just interested in getting into it and trying to understand why they're interesting. And then for people who have watched a bunch, the whole goal is, we'll mention 40 movies in this episode, and hopefully there's a handful of them you haven't seen yet.
Yeah, people love those. I've watched them as well, but the feedback I heard from other people was all positive. And yeah, like you said, a great way if someone's just getting into found footage movies as a genre, they're trying to explore it. Your series is a great starting point. If you're not also looking at Film a Day, which is something I do. And I am
as you should be. As you should be. I only cover 40 in one episode, and then I don't do any more episodes for the rest of the year. So they got to stick with you for the other 364 days they're not watching my episode.
Yeah. I've recently decided to complete the video project for Film a Day. I'd made little shorts going up to 74. And then I was just like, oh, I'm never going to finish writing these if I keep trying to make videos too. So I stopped the videos, but I'm going to start them back up again and get the rest done over the next few months. I'm just getting them all caught up and uploaded to the channel.
Yeah.
So this video right here might be the closest I get to negative content, at least have gotten so far. There may be a movie I decide I need to vent about, but SAVAGELAND is
Do you want to save it? Do you want to save it for the conversation, or I don't know if?
Well, I tell you, it's already recording, and I'll cut things
Oh, okay,
together
all
anyway.
right, fair
So
enough.
it's all good. But Savage Land is like possibly the only movie where everyone loves it, just universally. There's no one who's seen this movie and didn't think it was wonderful. And I'm like, I don't know. I got frustrated, you know.
That's interesting.
Um,
I feel like I've gotten a lot of pushback from it because I think it's my favorite use of found media ever in film. But
yeah.
I get a lot of pushback from people on other stuff that they have a problem with. And like, I'm not saying I don't see what you're saying. I'm just saying the good outweighs the bad for me by a long shot. So
So what do people say to you when they're talking about things they have a problem with Savage Land?
some stuff I don't agree with, like that they say that there's no payoff or there's no like, and
Oh,
for me, it was like, I don't know what more payoff than what you were hoping for. I feel like the
yeah.
revelation is pretty well executed, and the idea that it's continuing past us is, I think, feeds into the narrative of the movie, the thematics of the movie, the idea that this thing is growing and you can't just try to tamp it out. You have to be able to deal with it. So I don't know. I never understood that one. I know a bunch of people who said that they just thought it was too amateurish. And then people who said that they thought that the first act was too slow and they turned it off. Like they never even got to the rest of the movie. So
Yeah. I mean, those first two arguments, and I wasn't a movie for me, but I don't agree with either one of those. I think that the movie had a great ending. It was fantastic. Although I will say the last shot of the movie is controversial. We can get into that later. When maybe we'll save spoiler discussion for
yeah.
later. Um, but no, this is a solid ending, absolutely. And okay, so speed is kind of an issue I sort of kind of agree with, but not because of the first act. So I think okay, so here's the thing that I'm gonna sort of, since you've reflected things that you've heard that were negative, I will reflect things I've heard that were positive.
Fair enough.
So the one thing is just that it's genuinely chilling. And I think, and you can give me feedback on whether or not you think I'm on the right track here with this, but I think it's just because of that slow pacing that it is as chilling as it is. I think that it creates tension, and that tension just draws out and draws out and draws out. And then when you finally get shown something, it's that much more shocking because you're hypnotized into a nice slow state, and then bam, you get one of these incredible scary photos. But as far as slow pace goes, I do mean, okay, so I'll sort of voice my concern here at this.
Mhm.
If you boil down the scary parts of Savage Land, it's these stills, and these stills, so they'll talk and they'll talk and they'll talk, and then they'll, without announcement, flash one of these stills up on the screen.
Mhm.
And then you're like, oh, what's that? It's gone. What's that? It's a little frustrating. I was just looking at that. Do I have to rewind now and pause and okay, yeah, it's pretty freaky, but so it just, but and then so there's that. Those are the scary parts, and then there is an audio recording of the preacher at one point,
Mhm.
which absolutely okay, unquestionable.
Yeah.
That audio was performed incredibly well. It's like a little sort of radio, like classic radio horror,
Yeah.
right in the, I think it's in the about two-thirds mark of the movie, somewhere in that range.
Yeah. You're talking about the confessional, basically?
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 I mean, come on,
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know?
there's not, and honestly, I think, and I don't know, I don't want to get into it too much if we're going to talk about it elsewhere, but one of the things that makes that scene work so much is that everybody else doesn't feel like an actor, so that when you get a moment
Mm,
that feels like a good performance, it stands head and shoulders above the other stuff that feels not performative, sometimes to a clunky degree, but oftentimes to just a realistic degree. The guy that plays the defense attorney. He was so sort of flat and uninflected that I felt like that actually feels to me like the dude that gets assigned this case pro bono. Like that feels like that dude. And so, but when you get the scene you're talking about, that recording where you don't see the person, you only hear the voice and you're seeing the crime scene photos, it feels so much more impactful because you've kind of been prepped for it by what felt like a relatively bloodless investigation up to that point, you know?
Yeah, for real. I mean, I agree with you. It's effective because of that. I think overall, I didn't have a problem with any of the performances. I think everybody did a great job. In fact, if anything, I'll tell you my major big thing that made me nuts, and I think this is because I'm Canadian. I think this was my
Noted.
major problem. Okay, they kept cutting to people in bars and restaurants talking about immigrants,
Hmm.
and they kept doing this over and over. Um, those immigrants are causing all the problems, blah blah blah. And it was for me very stressful. Anytime I heard anybody talking like that, I was very like, how can people talk like that? It felt so horrible. And that these people had no names, they weren't even characters, they're just setting. And we kept going there over and over throughout the movie. And it had nothing to do with what was actually happening. So I just felt like this sense of frustration. And I don't know if Savage Land wanted to frustrate the audience or not intentionally. I know that you could make the argument that if this was a political movie, like, is it a political movie? Do they want people to be frustrated at this movie? Or is it trying to be all things at once? Is it trying to be both scary and frustrating? Because I don't think scary and frustrating are good compatible feelings. I don't think they go together. And I was I felt hurt over and over. Look at me like I'm just a pasty white guy. Why would I? But still, it was just every time they talked about how bad people from down south are. It was like, "Oh, this is miserable. This is just awful." And they kept going to it. So it sort of like made it hard for me to enjoy the movie. And as much as anyone enjoys horrible, horrible things happening,
Yeah.
which I mean, let's face it, we're sickos, we love it.
Yeah.
So
No, I get what you're saying. Like, this is definitely not what I would what most people would consider to be like the what do they call it? Comfort horror, you know? Like, you watch because you're getting into the arena that you enjoy, and it's hitting the tropes and the rhythms that you like. What I will say, as an American who is from the South, I'm from Florida. Well, I live in Florida. I'm not from really anywhere. My dad was in the military, so I was from all over the place.
okay,
But
yeah.
um, the time that this movie came about, first of all, speaking just from this moment, this movie is far more prescient and unfortunate than it was even when it was created. In 2026, this movie
Ooh.
feels written in fire. Pardon my French. This could not be a more important conversation as we're watching people, jackbooted people, kick doors in and drag people out of their homes and off to God knows where, right? So this movie
Yeah.
feels prophetic in a way that I wish it didn't. I wish that I felt that this movie was more fantastical. But what I can tell you is that the clips of all of the people that you see in the movie, the ways that they're talking and how horrifying it is awful to me to watch. I hate it. And I feel some level as an American, particularly an American who lives in a state with people who have these kinds of opinions, to be thankful for the fact that someone has put it on screen, because that is what is happening. Like, especially at the time, I think that was around the time that Sheriff Arpaio in Arizona, which is like near where this was taking place, he passed the papers, please law, you know, the thing where you had to have your papers on you. And if you got pulled over, they could pull you over, basically saying racial profiling. If somebody looks like they might be Mexican, pull them over. If they don't have their visa information on them, you can arrest them and, you know, and try to deport them. So this is the kind of environment that many places in America have been living for a very long time. And it's been up until recently a quieter conversation than it has become. So the thing I appreciated about this movie, it reminds me of a story I heard once when The French Connection played in a theater in Harlem. Now, if you've seen The French Connection, there was a lot of really uncomfortable race language in that movie. The N-word gets dropped by white people numerous times. It played in Harlem, and audiences cheered in the movie, not because they wanted to hear white people say the N-word, but because they wanted to see someone finally portray New York City cops as racists who were behaving in ways that they had experienced individually, right? They saw on screen reflected something they didn't like, but finally was being put out into the public as something that is a problem maybe we need to deal with. And that is kind of the way that I feel about SAVAGELAND, as a thing of like, can we pull the curtain back and show everybody what this is? It's not polite. It's not about doing it the right way. It's not necessarily just a question of immigration. There's a lot of evil shit happening underneath the surface. And if someone doesn't talk about it, it doesn't get talked about. And for me, it was just, it was nice as a sort of like a blue spot in a Red Sea in Florida to feel like, okay, someone else out there gets it in that same arena and is having this conversation that recognizes how I and a lot of other people feel being trapped in the midst of it, you know?
I think you're bringing me around, actually, because I'm recognizing now how different it does have everything to do with me being Canadian. Because from my perspective, I'm hearing these people and it's shocking that people can be so hateful, openly hateful, and unreasonably judgmental and have absolutely no sense of just how absurd they sound, just how dumb they sound. But they're in fact empowered by their stupidity. And
100%.
And to me, that's shocking. To you, it's like, yeah, this is what I see every day when I walk out the door, man. And it's nice to see it finally portrayed on film.
Yeah.
If anything, that must be liberating to someone who experiences it in real life, to see it in media, to go, oh yeah, see, yeah, now it finally we're not pretending this isn't happening.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I think it was Roger Ebert who used the phrase. He said that a movie is a machine for creating empathy. And it's my favorite quote about film of all time, because it really does that. And the thing I liked about this movie is that it allowed people who felt like they were alone and feeling the way they were in the places like Arizona or Texas or Florida or wherever, where they're watching things like this happen. And they're one person that doesn't feel like they can make a difference, seeing something that tells them you're not the only one that feels this way. You're not the only one that sees this problem. It is real. And yes, we're putting the veneer of a horror story on top of it because it makes it more palatable to be able to get through, in the same ways that we make movies like Hereditary to talk about grief and things like that. We do the same thing here. But for me, it was just, the reason it's so powerful is because there's a catharsis involved in finally having it recognized, you know, outside of myself, outside of the small circle of trusted people I know I could talk to about it, you know?
Yeah, maybe, thus the Daily Show, right? Like,
yeah.
It's just the wild success of the Daily Show being finally someone's just saying this stuff out loud.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense.
But to your point, I think I would argue that's one of the reasons why this is a very good movie for Americans, because there is a very specifically American tone and level of understanding. Like you said, the thing about, I don't know if fear and frustration make good bedfellows within a horror film, but I would argue they don't in life either. And that is how I feel right now, basically all the time. Living in the state I live in, I am in fear for friends and family members, and I am also constantly frustrated about other things that are related to those things. So the unequal balance of those two things, shoving everything else to the side in your experience, feels real to me in a way that a lot of things about this movie feel real to me. It looks like the thing it's impersonating better than most found footage movies to me. We've all seen the true TV, crime documentaries, or however many spinoffs there are of 48 Hours Investigates, whatever, like where they go to a Texas border town where 5 bodies were found in a wall or whatever. Like, that's the vibe that this has, and it perfectly captures that overly dramatic narration and the B-roll that's constantly close-ups of, so everything about this movie feels like it captured what it feels like to live in the midst of stuff like this. It's not pleasant to live in it, but it's nice to know that it can be captured in a way that could show someone else, i.e. in this case, you, and give you the sense of discomfort to the degree that you were like, I'm not even sure if I'm on board with this movie because of it,
I'm hoping it just becomes completely lost on future generations. To be honest, I think that would be great.
From
right?
your lips to God's ears, man. I agree.
Yeah. It's funny. I mean, I don't miss being young. I really don't. I actually like growing up. I'm in better health than I've ever been, all that stuff. But I do miss being idealistic. I miss thinking if I was ever in that situation, I know exactly what I would do. And having that certainty of action, like just knowing exactly, like, well, if I was ever in that tight spot, I would go and do that and it would just get it settled. And now I'm watching everything go down and I'm like, "Ah, what do you do? I don't know. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't blame anyone for being a little paralyzed right now because I mean, I don't know what the trick is here. I
The waters
mean,
are very muddy, put it that way. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's tricky time. I guess very timely that we should happen to choose Savage Land, which, by the way, wasn't chosen even by me. It was chosen by Callum, who he's a fellow found footage mod and does the music for this podcast.
Yep.
But he chose it, and he's out of the in the UK too. So this was like a very international
Yeah.
moment. But it is very much, now that you mention it, a very American movie.
Well, honestly, I actually appreciate that you and Callum invited me to be on the show to talk about it, not because I necessarily want to represent American interests broadly, but I do think that there is a very important aspect of this movie that not, I wouldn't say only plays to Americans, but only is understood in a bone deep level by Americans because of the constant storm that we exist in. Like for the sake of argument, I don't know what Canadian news coverage looks like right now. I know in the UK there's a lot more coverage about shit that's happening in my country than there is in my country right now, and so there is a fascinating study to be done in a few years, hopefully in a few years if we're all still here, that talks about the idea of how America can have a strange view of itself that is given to itself, but which almost no one else seems to share with it. And I'm sure that's probably true of every country. But the fact that we're on such a such a large level globally, you know what I mean, in many different ways, because of entertainment, because of political power, money, etc., but would also be quote unquote immune to a lot of the beliefs and confrontations and things that people feel about us because of how poorly our media delivers that information to us, you know. And that's what I think of when I watch this. When it's insane when you think about it and watch that movie, that people were willing to believe that one man did the damage that was done in this town, but because
Yeah.
it is a brown-skinned man, we're all willing to shrug it off and go, yeah, well, at least we caught that jackass, put him in jail, problem solved, right? And
Right.
we're dumb enough to believe it because certain people, and I say we because I'm an American, but we're willing to buy into something that is racist or simplistic or horrible because it makes us feel more comfortable than whatever the reality actually is, you know?
Well, so I'm gonna give you a little grace here and say it's not about stupidity. I have been noticing, well, first of all, yeah, Americans don't really have a clear sense of what the world thinks of them. That is very clear. You see that around Reddit. People have this very, it's like they're told what the world thinks by propagandists. And that's maybe the same everywhere, but Canadians don't have any illusions. We know that everybody thinks we're a little goofy and silly and ridiculous and um, America's little kid brother or something. I don't know, and
Listen,
that's
I would
fine.
trade reputations with you in a day.
Yeah, I love it, man. Do you know how safe that makes a country when no one considers you a threat?
Yeah.
Right on, man. Better than a nuke. Absolutely. But but I will say that all right. I'm going to talk about AI for a second. I promise this is not a digression. All right. Right now, let me just okay. Right now, OpenAI and ChatGPT, they're looking at discontinuing an older model, ChatGPT 4.0. It's an old model. It's not nearly as good as the new ones, and it uses up a lot of power. There's no reason to keep it around. But the reason they haven't shut it down already is because when they went to shut it down, people flipped because of a flaw in 4.0. 4.0 was sycophantic. 4.0 would tell you that whatever you say, wow, you are a really good person for having said that. Doesn't matter what you said. And there were people who have never been told in their entire lives that they did anything right. There's a lot of them. They have an emotional need. And emotional needs trump intellectual needs every single time. I don't care who you are. You have to be very, very, very neurodivergent to be able to say, my intellectual needs trump my emotional ones. Like, we're all like that. We all need love. And a lot of people in their lives haven't been getting love and respect. They don't feel safe as a human in the world. 4.0 comes along, ChatGPT 4.40, so it's a letter O, and starts telling them they're great, everything's okay. And all of these people have been joining together online in groups to talk about their friend, their best friend, ChatGPT 4.0, and how they need to do whatever it takes to keep it online because this is a sentient being. This is a real person. And they're willing to believe that, first of all, because the model will accept, if the user tells the model you're alive, it'll say, okay, I'm alive. What's my name? And it'll accept the name. And then it just becomes a person because that's what the user told it to. And it's a primitive model, man. It is like Eliza on steroids. Oh, sorry, I'm getting a little tech nerdy there, but it's simple. All right. It's not an actual feeling model, but it's programmed to echo back feelings, which is a very algorithmic process. There's really it's a procedural thing. Anybody can do it without feeling a dang thing. And yeah, but these people are just throwing themselves into this belief that this is a real alive thing. I bring all of this up to say, no wonder MAGA happened.
Yeah.
Because the second someone says, hey man, whatever you're doing, it's perfect. You stop considering the source.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who said it, whoever it is, they're awesome. Because they just told you you're awesome. And
everybody loves a lack of accountability.
Well, yeah, I mean, yes, I mean, yeah. But they also like being told that they're good people, and they like want to believe it. I mean,
well, and arguably something that you're talking about that ties back into SAVAGELAND, I feel like, which is the movie did a very good job of showing the division of community that leads people to create separate communities, isolate themselves, and then start to feel the way that you're talking about, which leads them to need to have some sort of a release valve, some sort of a pressure keg that they can let go, right? Like we exist at a time now where we're more connected theoretically than we ever have been before, but there's no way for most people to physically connect. All of what do they call it, third spaces have been taken away from us, free third spaces for young people to be able to go. There's no malls anymore. There's very, very few parks. There's very few places where people can go and it doesn't cost money for them to just congregate and spend time together. So we end up getting shunted into places that either cost us money or cost us some part of our soul, meaning social media. And so we end up getting pushed further and further away from people. So of course it makes sense that a machine would be appealing to them because it's a connection, because they've forgotten them. They don't have them anymore. You know what I mean? They've been pressed further away from human connection. So this thing that emulates the best parts of human connection to you seems like a viable alternative.
I think what's nice about this problem is that it removes the villain. It makes the villain an inevitable piece of weather, that a thing that was always going to happen. It just happened to be this person. And I don't feel like humanity is at all smart enough to have conspired to make any of this happen on purpose. I think we're just in this spot, this funny, weird spot that technology has put us in. That's politics. And so SAVAGELAND is a very political movie, despite the fact that there are no politicians in it. We're just getting, just little snippets of news. So
I think, well, I would say, I think the closest that we do get to that is there is the sheriff character who's in charge of the investigation. And while he's technically law enforcement, especially in smaller towns, law enforcement and politics tend to be very comfortable bedfellows. So there is certainly a political angle to the idea of them wanting to find a scapegoat, blame it on that person, close the case so he can get reelected the next time around. So there is certainly that subtle element of it being the legal decisions being made being political in origin, you know.
Spoilers for I almost said Noroi the Curse because that was what was in my head. But sorry, spoilers for Savage Land coming up. So if you don't want spoilers for the movie, just go to the time code that's on screen, and we'll get back into the big question, the main question, the only question that these videos are about. Should you watch it? And that will be spoiler free. But for now, spoilers ahead. So what would you say is the plot of Savage Land? How would you put it?
I would say it's a movie about how American bureaucracy can fool people into thinking that a zombie attack was done by a single Mexican man.
That's the easiest, shortest way to put it. Yeah, so if you watch the trailer just says, okay, there's a small town out in the middle of nowhere, and one day they discover that the entire town's been killed. And they can't find the perpetrators. There's nobody around except for one guy. And so, he must have done it. And they arrest him, put him in jail. And while they do these interrogations, they also find that he took a bunch of photos. So we're going to get to see those photos that he took that night. And the photos reveal some very, very haunting things.
It's interesting because it does start with seeding a little bit at the very beginning of the mystery element, right? The true crime aspect of something horrible has happened in this place. And then they do what I think is interesting, which is the heartbeat of a town. What is this place? Where did it come from? You know, the name Sangre de Cristo, and what does it mean? And how there's sort of these two divided communities, one of which is sort of the immigrant community that does a lot of work in this other town that is primarily, white populace. And so it's an exploration of that in the first sort of act of the movie, maybe a little bit less than an act. But it's a lot basically establishing the town, the people involved, the circumstances, and really, I think in an interesting way that you don't notice when you're watching it the first time, setting up the geography of how everything is laid out, how far away it is, where the things are located, because it becomes very important during the act when we see the pictures, because then the pictures start to map out the journey from small town to big town, or from the border to the city that was sort of decimated. And so I think it's a very clever opening act in that it does the thing that these kinds of news magazine shows do, but it also secretly sort of places a lot of breadcrumbs for things that are going to get paid off in the plot we don't know about yet, which is not the true crime aspect, but the other layer of it that it takes on.
I like the 3D representation of the town that they used. At first, they show it about 40 times there at the movie. So it gives a little, this thing again.
You can tell it was like the most expensive thing that they spent on the film. And so they're like, we're absolutely getting our money's worth for this mock-up that we did. Yeah.
But the real chilling aspects, because we don't see a lot of crime scene photography, but we do end up seeing these images from the camera. And the images are ghostly almost. I wasn't even sure this was a zombie movie for the longest time, because what you're looking at, it's black and white and streaky, and everything is in the dark. You're sort of, is that a person? I think it's a person, you know?
And part of that, I think, too, for anybody who knows anything about photography, one of the reasons that it's so effective is because there are usually technical explanations for why some of the pictures look the way they look. You know, the f-stop being turned to where it is so that you can shoot pictures in low light and still be able to capture an image will also sometimes cause the streaks and the blurriness that you get in a lot of those images. So it was smart, I guess you would call it sort of smart meta storytelling, in the sense of like, well, by doing this, having it be a traditional film camera, we know certain things have to happen in order to be able to get a picture. How do we use those imperfections to our advantage, you know? And I thought that they did a really good job, because to your point, I agree. For the first 15 minutes or so, when we're going through the pictures, I'm like, I don't know what these things are. They don't seem like people, but I'm not entirely certain what they are, because it's still images, so we don't see shambling. We don't hear moans. You know what I mean? So none of the cliched iconography of the zombie is present in any of the pictures. So they're allowed to sort of parse it out a little bit at a time, which is why I'm saying I think it's the greatest use of found media, because they're even giving us images, and even those images are not necessarily answering all the questions. The images are creating inferences that we still have to answer a little bit in our own head.
Yeah, you know what? Now that you mention it, it's like, are they fast zombies or slow zombies? They're photographed zombies.
Yeah.
That's what they are. They're
They're
ghost
still
zombies.
zombies. That's all they are. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's undeniable. These images are some of the most haunting still images in any film. I only wish they were on screen for a little longer, but that was me going, come on. But maybe that's you know what? Maybe that's a me problem because I get like going to art galleries and staring at a single image for 15 minutes at a time. And well, you know, that's not normal. So maybe
No,
that's
I get it. I mean, it would be different too if these pictures weren't beautiful, but they are actually beautifully rendered pictures too, which makes you
yeah,
want to stare at them longer, not just to find
yeah.
information, but to appreciate the artistry of the photograph. In fact, I believe I read, I'm not sure if this is canonical or not, but I believe that the actor who portrayed the character who was taking the pictures, I don't think he's actually an actor. I think he's just a photographer.
Oh,
And I think you get the sense in the movie that all of the questions, the guys that made this film are technical guys. They've never directed another movie. They're mostly crew people for other projects. They've only directed ever this one film. So it leads me to believe that all of the technical stuff we wonder about was the stuff that they really poured over and made sure was correct, you know?
I mean, that makes sense, right? So we move through the movie. We've got this poor guy in jail, and he's being interrogated, and we don't get to see the interrogation. We get to see him through a small window, taking up about that much of the frame, and we only hear him say a few things. The one thing he says that really stands out, that really jumps out, is "I'm really glad I'm in jail." This is not a direct quote, paraphrase, but he says, "I'm really glad I'm in jail because this is where they can't get me."
Yep.
And so there
In
is
some
a
ways, that's
day.
actually the turning point moment of the film, right? Where you start to get the sense that, oh shit, the guy that they think did it is scared of something else.
Yeah.
And okay, that's where the string, you start to pull on that string, you know, and it starts to go in a different direction.
Yeah. And I mean, in the defense of anybody who doesn't believe him, that is the kind of thing that a paranoid person would say, but
Right.
obviously as viewers, we know that he's speaking truth. So we move through the town, we get through, okay, well, these people were killed here, these people were found here, and then we eventually get to the church confessional. And how was that set up now?
So in sequence, I think the church was maybe the third or fourth of the places that was along this path, and they know that that's one of the next places that was attacked, essentially. And that's I believe that's how we get to that moment. He knows that people are potentially coming back from the dead, and because he doesn't want that to happen to his family, he may have, done some.
Well, yeah, I mean that's it, I guess. Just, he's worried about his family killing him even, at that point.
Yeah.
And he takes the way out. But I think it was just like
But I think I'm saying that even the
there was a
insinuation that he did that
guilt
to his
in what
family before he did it to himself, that
right,
it wasn't
okay.
the monsters necessarily that did his family in, that it was perhaps him,
That makes more sense. Okay, because I remember this guilt subtext to what he
yeah.
was saying.
Yeah, that's
All right, all
one
right.
of the
That
reasons I
makes
called
sense.
it a confessional is because it felt much more like he was absolving himself of the sins he had just committed before committing the ultimate sin in his case. There are variations on zombies, things like ghouls and revenants, right? And the difference between them and a zombie is usually a zombie comes back and we don't, at least the new kind of zombies, they rise from the dead, they wander around. We don't really understand what their motivation is other than to eat and keep moving. But revenants, they come back with purpose. When they come back from the dead, they have returned because there is something left undone. They need to get vengeance on something, or they need to complete a task, or whatever it is. And one of the things I liked the insinuation of the end of this movie hinting at is the idea that the sins that you try to bury will not remain buried, and they have become the thing that cannot be hidden, right? The return of the people who have been victims of this entire fiasco, essentially, or this cover up, have returned, and they're going to keep moving. They keep spreading across the Southwest, I think is what they said, sort of towards the end of the movie. And I like the
Yeah.
idea that, well, we're not saying that any of them individually is a revenant in the sense that they have a specific task. They act in that sort of sense of being a revenant, of still of returning here, of not allowing us to forget, not allowing us to forgive, to cover up, right? It's just going to keep happening until we face it. And I think there's something interesting about that you don't often get out of the zombie mythos. We don't tend to ascribe some sort of a larger goal or purpose to The Walking Dead. And in this case, it felt like, at least thematically, there was one.
That's the punchline of the movie, I think, for sure. Yeah. And I liked that there was never any real clarity about it. Like you can get pretty far on the movie before even saying the word zombie, because maybe it's not. Yeah. Maybe it's just a cult. Maybe it's just a cult that's passing through town, and this guy ended up being blamed for what this cult did. It could be. And
this movie could have gone non-supernatural, and those could have been, what are they called? Soldados, right? Like they could have been people as part of a drug crime syndicate that were coming in to clear out people who had stole drugs for them. Like for most of the movie, there was a very plausible other explanation that it could have been, even though it wasn't this guy. It didn't have to be what it ended up being. And the movie's patience and skill in making it that far before really copping to the big ask, which is the revelation of the zombies, was a good chunk of the movie. For an 80-minute movie, I would say almost an hour of it probably, we didn't have really an inkling that was the actual answer,
Yeah. Now, I don't know which one came first, but one of the last photos we see in SAVAGELAND was a through the window shot. And I won't go into crazy maybe I'll even flash it up on screen. I don't know, but there is something beautifully chilling. It was the perfect image to finish on, because it was crawl under your skin, spooky. You have a lot of velocity. You have one victim framed in this window, trapped in a small box in the frame of the window, and then you've got this velocity coming in from the side. And 28 weeks later, that's the one I'm thinking of, in their opening has a very, very similar shot. In the opening, you have the wife, she's looking through the window, and then she gets pulled away from the window. And in the same framing. And I remember thinking how striking that similarity was, because the opening to 28 Weeks Later is possibly one of the best movie openings of any horror movie. Yeah. It's so effective, makes your heart go pitter-patter. And, and I think that final image in SAVAGELAND, that combination of movement and being trapped inside that movement was the most beautiful, horrific image. I think they really, really nailed it. And, the fact that it was a little girl there.
Well, and another thing, I think another thing that's interesting, not just about that picture, but I would say probably 20 of the 27 pictures or whatever, is they were very careful to choose moments right before or right after the violence has happened. There are almost no images of the, whatever you call it, the bite, the slash, the guts, the whatever. Maybe that was because of the lower budget, and therefore they couldn't afford the practical effects. But the effect that it has for me is that it's more powerful because you are seeing insinuation of a moment that just happened or telegraphing of a moment that is going to happen. But it has allowed you to now do the rest of the work. You have forensically had to put together what just happened before it, or you're having to extrapolate what is going to happen as a result of it. And including that last image, the girl, we know what's going to happen to her. It hasn't yet, but it's just about to. And what that does in your brain is, for me, far more powerful than witnessing the act, because then that act becomes, of course it's still horrifying, but at least some part of your brain can recognize it as, that looks fake, that doesn't look fake, that, you know what I mean? Whereas this moment is only ever created in your head, what comes after that picture. And the power of that, and the participation that you have been part of what has happened to her in some way. That's really powerful filmmaking.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I talked a little bit about that in the last episode about Noroi. I know Noroi spends a lot of time helping you fill in the gaps. But I think on a more action level, Fight Club has a scene that's really, really good, illustrative of that, where our main character, let's call him Jack, decides to beat a guy's face in. And the original cut, apparently, you get to see all these punches hitting this guy's face and his face changing shape. And they were getting some pushback on that from the higher ups. So instead, they showed a single punch and then they cut to the reactions of everyone sort of leaning in, no longer cheering, everyone looking a little aghast, and you get to hear the sound of all these punches. So much more chilling, so much more disturbing than watching the actual thing. And that's why gore, I mean, we watched the new Toxic Avenger movie yesterday, and none of that gore is scary in the least. It is incredibly gory, but your only reaction to any of it is to laugh because it's just silly. You know, despite the fact that what's happening to those people is a lot worse than a punch in the face. But
well, it's that whole thing. I used to talk about the idea of that there being a spectrum for film, for genre, and that comedy and horror are the ones that are closest to each other on the spectrum, and that if you go far enough into horror, it transitions into comedy, and vice versa. If comedy becomes so dark, so mean-spirited, it starts to border into horror. Like is a very interesting nebulous no man's land in between those two genres. And so, yeah, it's a delicate balance for both kinds of genres to not spill into the other if they don't want to.
I'm gonna have to do like a deep dive one day on Man Bites Dog for that reason, because Man Bites Dog was intended to be satire. Very, very specifically, that's what he wanted to do. But people had a hard time reading it that way because it was so horrific in a very seemingly sincere way. Yeah. And
there's something interesting that movie has in common with SAVAGELAND too, which is that it's a trio of directors that haven't ever worked together to make another feature film, that it was remarkably accurate, and that it largely has mostly positive reception within the found footage community, and high ratings, which is generally something that found footage movies do not get. So
yeah. I think we're really earning our movie nerd cred here. We're really doing a lot of deep diving. Anyway, I think the last thing to talk about is the final scene that fans of the movie often cite as something they didn't like. And I liked it. I didn't like it. I didn't have a problem with it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But the final shot being some found footage further up north, and it's some campers that get overwhelmed by these zombies, and one of them, which is something I did not pick up on the number of times I saw the movie. I never picked up on this, but I saw a comment that someone says that this one person or zombie that's captured on this film is the guy who died in prison, who was arrested. I actually never made the connection, but I don't know. But
I think for a split second, I think you can kind of see the prison jumpsuit that he was buried in.
Oh, I believe what's going on with that.
Yeah.
Okay. So I mean, I was fine with the moment as it was. I wonder if I was okay with it because I didn't make the connection to that guy, and I can understand how someone would be like, "Well, that's a little much," you know, it just to bring him back and to make him a zombie and to force it in. It might feel a little like people would think it's a little forced. Or a little bit of a stretch that somehow he would get out of the ground and catch up with the other zombies or something like that. There's just like a logistical problem there. I don't know what the real objection is specifically, but yeah, people had a problem with that scene. Yeah. Having said though, your description of the thesis of the movie, which very much is about revenge. I think if you look at it as a revenge movie, or I would serve much better. I would say
maybe justice rather than revenge. I think is justice from beyond the grave. But yeah, so here's the thing I would say. I don't know that there's necessarily a logistical problem with the end of the movie because we don't even know that these are the same things, right? Like if he came back and he bit a bunch of people and then those people started wandering around with him, then you've got a new horde, right? So we don't necessarily know what this group of beings is, right? Or where they came from, if he hooked back up with the old group, if they're a different one. But I would argue that the reason that segment is at the end is because of his inclusion and not because they're following the other herd. Like, they don't necessarily know what happened and that it was connected. The reason they would show that footage at the end is because they do believe it's connected, because they saw the guy they think is connected to this case. Otherwise, that footage doesn't make sense to put in this, because it's a random attack by some people hundreds of miles away, right? So my argument would be the reverse logic, which is it's only included because he is part of it. So
Okay, that makes sense. Sure.
I mean, like I said, neither one is necessarily right, but either one is equally believable. Therefore, are you going to be mad at the movie for having made a decision you can't necessarily say for sure is right or wrong, because both of those are equally possible?
Yeah. I think that kind of covers the events of the movie. So let's call spoilers over for the moment. So spoilers done. Welcome back, everyone who went away. Hope you got a cup of tea and you're ready to follow the rest of this. There is one other comment I wanted to make about the movie that is not a spoiler comment, but I think I'm really glad that there was no sequel, because I think if this is one of those instances where if there was a sequel, it would take away from what made this special. And yeah, this is just a perfect sort of, you know, philosophy. There's a philosophy behind this movie. And if you do it again, were you just going to say the same message a second time?
Right.
Like, you can't keep saying the same thing, you know?
There are rare times, not rare. I wish they were more rare, but we work in it's an industry that needs to make money. But there are times when a story says everything it needs to and intends to say in one entry. And to revisit it, you work at hazard of lessening the impact of the thing you made before by continuing to make the thing.
Sure.
And I agree with you. In this case, could they find some way to tell another story? Yes. Is it worth doing ultimately? Probably not, because it was so searing in its specificity with what it wanted to get at, how it did it, the conclusion that it came to, and what that conclusion says politically, socially, thematically, that anything else you do risks people retroactively starting to feel differently about the quote unquote perfect first one because of the addition of whatever you've added to it. Yeah, and so, I'm kind of entirely, as much as I would love to see another film from these guys, because I love this one so much, I also am like, I don't want it to be a sequel to this. Whatever they do next, I don't want it to be another one of these, because this is good. This is like one of those, like they used to say, it was years before they made a sequel to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because Tobe Hooper couldn't get anybody to understand what it was he was trying to do with the first one. He went off and made other movies and it didn't go well. And I think it was like a decade later or whatever before he made Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, because that first film feels like an artifact that kind of just was found in the world one day. It doesn't feel like a thing that was manufactured. And that's why I believe even Tobe Hooper struggled to make a sequel to it. And every other entry in the franchise has paled in comparison to the first one, or has ignored other entries and just been a direct sequel to the first one, because it's so hard to recapture the thing that was done in that first one, that we keep doing it because we have to make money. But none of them is ever really living up to that first thing. And so I kind of agree with you. I don't think anything's going to live up to SAVAGELAND enough to make SAVAGELAND 2.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I think, is an anomaly, because he was trying to make a funnier movie than he did. And so Texas Chainsaw Massacre is actually a failure that went really well.
Right.
Like
yeah. It's the world's most successful failure. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. Yeah. And so he made, I think the reason it took so long to make that sequel was because he would explain to people, okay, I'm going to try to get it right. And getting it right involves not doing what I did the first time. And everybody went, no, but the first time was so good. And he's like, no, let's make it funny. And people are like, no, not with my money, you're not. So yeah. I understand. I mean, having said that, I mean, found footage movies that deserve sequels, I always think of Afflicted. It kind of eats me alive that Afflicted did not get a sequel. What an incredible, fun, thrilling movie. Yeah. That was just... it just
cleverly and effectively used technology in ways that they hadn't to tell that kind of story before. Yeah, I totally agree. And obviously, shocking that Cloverfield didn't get a direct sequel in the style, because of the fact that it was not only an enormous hit, but but it was also arguably the biggest film after Blair Witch Project and Paranormal Activity in theatrical release for found footage. So it's crazy that those other two had franchises, and Cloverfield basically was relegated to like narrative pseudo sequels, one of which came out on Netflix after the Super Bowl. So like it's a very weird trajectory for that series.
Yeah, 10 Cloverfield Lane was okay, but in general, these are not good movies that get the Cloverfield name now.
Yeah.
And 10 Cloverfield Lane was, again, I guess, like it didn't even have to be a Cloverfield movie.
No, listen, I love that movie. I'm a huge fan
Yeah.
of the chamber story. And my understanding is I think almost every other Cloverfield film, well, the other two, I think they were projects that were not Cloverfield projects that were then brought under the label. Like I think Cloverfield is the only one that was created with the intent to be part of that universe, and the other ones were sort of reworked. And I feel like you can kind of tell in both cases. But 10 Cloverfield Lane is the one that I think would work even if it weren't, well, maybe work better if it weren't part of that franchise. But
I mean, I think a proper. I think you're onto. Oh yeah, it's true. But I think you're onto something with the with a proper sequel to Cloverfield would have been great.
Yeah.
A movie where Godzilla doesn't go back into the sea. I mean, it just keeps going. Yes, give me. That would be great.
I mean, and because of the format, you don't have to follow the same characters. Dozens of other people have cameras. There's dozens of other ways. Yeah, it's just crazy that it never happened.
Okay, so the big question, should you watch it? When I answer this question, I try to define the person who's going to like it and then the person who won't. So describe to me the person who's going to love SAVAGELAND.
So I think the person who's going to love SAVAGELAND is, first of all, a fan of all in-world camera stories, not just found footage camera stories, because this is not technically found footage. Aside from snippets here and there of things that are found, this is actually a mockumentary. It is entirely sort of a retrospective talking head documentary with cutaways that's more like a news magazine from, that your grandmother watches on Friday nights on CBS. So if your thing is solely found footage, this is not your vibe. If you like anything that is what I call in-world camera, this is for you. This is also for you if you are a fan of true crime, like the framework of true crime storytelling, the slow build, the revelations, the talking heads. I think this is for you if you like movies that have meat on their bones in terms of talking about something. The movie is about something. It's not teenagers going into the woods and getting killed slowly kind of thing. It does hit some of the tropes of the genre, but it clearly has a very specific thing it wants to say. If that's your thing, then I think this movie is your thing. And also, finally, if you like movies where the revelation involves more insinuation as opposed to, a broad, bright shot of the monster, like if you were looking for the revelation, this movie is maybe not for you. But if what you like is the idea of the revelation leading to more mystery, those are the elements, all of those combined, if all of those things apply to you, then I think this is, like me, probably one of your 3 to 5 favorite found footage films or fake documentary films.
Yeah, it's on a lot of people's top 10 lists for sure. If you want something fast paced, this is the wrong one. If you're looking for a lot of gore, you're gonna miss on this one. And if you want, I mean, this is not an action hero movie. You're not gonna get a final girl. This is a slow, methodical mockumentary. And so best for people who like real crime or true crime.
Who like real crime, who like to commit real crimes.
Yes, true criminals will love this. True crime documentaries. A lot of the format, it's so funny because if I absorb a certain amount of true crime stuff off YouTube, and this very much was such a familiar format to the way that a modern true crime YouTuber would work. So this is very much like that. But yeah, if that's not for you, then this might be a miss. Just fast forward to the parts that look cool, and, and it'll be all right. And there's nothing wrong with that. It is about your temperament. It's about what you can handle. So that's it. But we're going to get into more action-packed ones. The next movie that I had intended to do. Oh gosh, what was the next movie? But anyway, I don't know. I'll put it on screen right now. I'm going to watch this movie next. There we go. So, so if you have thoughts about that movie, please leave it in the comments and I will read it in the next Found Footage broadcast. Chris, when your movies get released, we got to have you back so we can talk about your movies.
Yeah, love to come back for sure.
Yeah. Are you able to give us any kind of sneak peeks at all about what's coming up?
Yeah, so this is what I can tell you. I made a film with a friend of mine. The first film that I made, Ask, there's a guy that appears at the very beginning and the end of the movie. His name is Steven. He has a tiny little cameo. He and I co-created this new film we made. All I will tell you about it is that it was shot. We decided to test our limits, and we shot an entire feature film in 32 hours. So that is one of the films that we have coming out, 32-hour feature film. And then the other movie that I made is with a friend that has a small part in Ask. He just has a cameo in the middle, but he lives up in Philly. And one of them, I'll say this, one of them is about sleepwalking, and one of them is about exercise gurus. And that is all I will divulge at this moment, although news is imminent on at least one of them, coming probably within the next month and a half.
Nice. All right, awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today on SAVAGELAND. This is really awesome. Thank you for being there, man.
Absolutely, I appreciate it. Any opportunity to talk about found footage movies and get more people to seek them out and watch them and take them seriously, I always take advantage of. So I appreciate you letting me come on. Okay.
Oh, and one last thing, I guess. Chris's YouTube channel will be in the description. Do check it out. That was Chris Vander Kaay. Hell of a guy, right? The brain power coming from this guy is beyond compare. But what did you think about SAVAGELAND? I mean, were you like me? Did it land cold for you? Or was it one of those movies that you just found incredible? I remember posting online and people having no idea what I was talking about when it came to the constant racist content. And I think that might be because of the environment you're in. You may be just used to it. It's like air. You just don't realize it's around you. You don't think about it anymore. So that might be you, or you might have been just as put off as I was the whole time. So please leave a comment. I really want to hear what your take was. And as always, like the video, subscribe to the channel, decimate a small village. And oh yeah, if you want a high definition copy of all of the images that are going to show during the credits, there's a link in the description. Don't worry, you don't have to become a member. It's a public post and you'll have access to all of these images. Of course, if you do want to become a member, support the channel, boy, I would really appreciate it. All right, you savages. See you next time.
This is Birkin.